China has gone from one of the poorest countries on the planet to lifting more than 800 million people out of poverty. In fact, according to World Bank data, China was responsible for three-quarters of all of the world's reduction in extreme poverty since the 1980s. When you look at the Global Inequality Index, or inequality between countries trend, you take away China from the data, and you will notice there is no significant change in index. Today, China is the world's largest or second largest economy, depending on which economic yardstick you use. China's economic policies have been nothing short but remarkable. I mean, China has overseen the most incredible economic growth in human history. Today, there are many poor and developing countries looking at China as an inspiration and hope for their own future. While China's unique political and historical context cannot be replicated, there are variables that can be adapted. China's experience offers valuable lessons for poor and developing countries that aspire to grow their economies, lift people out of poverty, and become competitive. While there are many variables from China's growth model that can offer valuable lessons, it's crucial to recognize that China's model is not one size fits all. The successful application of these variables depends on local governance, cultural factors, and both economic and geopolitical conditions. By understanding and adapting some of these variables to match unique local contexts, poor and developing countries can create their own pathways to sustain growth and development, much like China has. Like these countries, personally am also driven by a deeper curiosity about China's economic rise, its technological advancements, and how it strategically leveraged foreign direct investment, FDI, to catch up with and sometimes surpass global competitors. United States publicly views China as an existential threat. Am not entirely sure, but think this was response to China's Made in China 2025 industrial policy it revealed in 2015. This policy signaled China's intent to dominate key high-tech industries like semiconductors, artificial intelligence, robotics, and clean energy technologies. China's journey from a poor nation to a global powerhouse is very compelling indeed, especially considering its unique blend of state-driven policies, foreign partnerships, and domestic innovation. China's approach has reshaped global markets, particularly in technology and manufacturing, influencing both emerging and developed economies. Understanding China's role in the world would provide additional valuable insights, especially in a time when geopolitical tensions and trade relationships are constantly evolving. China's rise represents one of the most significant shifts in global power dynamics in modern history. How did China not only influence global markets, but how its rise has redefined international relations, trade, and geopolitical strategies? I am intrigued of the broader implications of China's influence on global governance, from technology standards to its leadership in areas like climate change, AI, and infrastructure development through initiatives like the Belt and Road. China has challenged the long-held and unchallenged modern opinion about Western-centric narratives about economic growth and global leadership. Modern economic methods widely applied in the West has been shaped by a series of influential thinkers like Adam Smith, who is considered the father of modern economics. His well-known concept is the laissez-faire economics, minimal government intervention in markets. He introduced the idea of GDP. David Ricardo developed the theory of comparative advantage, which explains how nations benefit from trade by specializing in producing goods for which they have a lower opportunity cost. His work laid the groundwork for modern international trade theory. Milton Friedman emphasized the importance of controlling the money supply to manage inflation. He criticized excessive government intervention, promoting a return to free market principles. His ideas significantly influenced neoliberal economics and policies in the 1980s, especially under leaders like Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan, era when many public institutions were privatized in the UK and USA. John Maynard Keynes advocated for government intervention in the economy during times of recession. Debates between free market advocates and Keynesian interventionists continues in the West mainly. I believe this debate will soon see closure. China has proven beyond any doubt that alternative systems of governance and economic management can succeed, even if they defy established norms like free markets and liberal democracy. China has drawn from several of these economic models, adapting and blending them with its own unique political and social framework to fuel its remarkable growth, especially those related to free trade, innovation, and government intervention, while simultaneously maintaining its state-driven development strategy. Its model demonstrates a pragmatic approach, selectively incorporating ideas from classical, Keynesian, and neoclassical economics, while addressing its own political and social realities. The challenge for other developing countries is figuring out which aspects of this blend could be adapted to their unique contexts. China's adoption of market reforms from the late 1970s under Deng Xiaoping reflects Adam Smith's ideas about the benefits of market competition and specialization. China embraced free market principles in its special economic zones (SEZs), allowing private enterprise and foreign investment to drive economic growth, particularly in export-led manufacturing. China strategically applied Ricardo's theory of comparative advantage by focusing on labor-intensive, low-cost manufacturing during its early stages of reform to become the global manufacturing powerhouse, boosting exports and increasing wealth through international trade. China often embraced Keynesian principles of government intervention, particularly in times of economic slowdown or crisis. The Chinese government has consistently used large-scale infrastructure investments and public spending to stimulate the economy. During the 2008 global financial crisis, China implemented a massive $586 billion stimulus package, focusing on infrastructure to maintain growth. China's state-owned enterprises (SOE) play a critical role in key industries, indicating a blending of government control with market-driven growth. While China doesn't adhere fully to Friedman's monetarist ideas, the Chinese central bank, the People's Bank of China, has employed monetary policies to control inflation and manage economic stability. Robert Solo's growth theory, which emphasizes the role of technological progress in driving long-term economic growth, probably is central to China's economic model in recent years. China's focus on technology, particularly its push to lead in areas like 5G, AI, and clean energy, demonstrates its recognition that future growth depends on moving beyond just labor and capital to include technological innovation. China's Made in China 2025 initiative to move up the value chain, investing in industries like artificial intelligence, electric vehicles, semiconductors, and renewable energy will lead to the creative destruction of older industries, much as Joseph Schumpeter predicted would happen in capitalist economies. This insight was also covered in my earlier video, Peek into China's 14th Economic Plan, Old versus New Growth Drivers, Winners and Losers by Eric Lee. Now you didn't think that I forgot how ancient the Chinese kingdom was, and that China has a long history of trade dating back to the ancient Silk Road, and was considered one of the world's wealthiest civilizations in ancient times. Given this rich history, of course, it's very plausible that China developed its own economic models, philosophies, and practices over the centuries, way before these modern economic models were revealed. In fact, it will not be surprising if some of these modern economic theories were modeled after China's ancient economic knowledge. These indigenous models may not always align with Western economic theories, but they played a key role in shaping China's unique approach to governance, trade, and economic management. Among the more known are Confucianism, a system of ethics and governance dating back to the 5th century BC, has profoundly influenced China's social and economic philosophy up till today. Confucianism discouraged excessive merchant activity and profit-seeking as it valued the welfare of society over individual gain. This philosophy influenced China's agrarian-based economy for centuries, placing emphasis on land and farming. During the Han Dynasty, 206 BC, 220 CE, China expanded its economic trade by establishing the Silk Road, which facilitated trade across Eurasia. China's controlled much of valuable goods like silk, tea, porcelain, and spices that used this route, made it a dominant economic power in the ancient world. During this period, trade was encouraged for the benefit of the state, and China was already a highly export-oriented economy, with the imperial government playing a major role in managing trade. His echoes modern China's export-driven growth. Throughout much of its imperial history, China favored a state-centered economic model, where the government played a dominant role in controlling the flow of goods, managing infrastructure, such as grand canals for irrigation and trade, and regulating the production of key goods. State monopolies were established over certain industries, and wealth was distributed through government-controlled systems like land redistribution programs. This method still resonates with modern China, where state-owned enterprises, SOEs, still play a significant role in strategic industries. China was an overwhelmingly agrarian society, with its economy centered on subsistence farming and the cultivation of rice, wheat, and millet. Agriculture was viewed as the backbone of the economy and the foundation of the state's power. The self-sufficiency model was important, especially during the Ming, 1368 to 1644, and Qing dynasties, 1644 to 1912. This agricultural emphasis still influences modern policies around food security and rural development in China today. Maoist economic models, 1949 to 1978, were heavily influenced by Marxist-Leninist socialism, its collectivization of agriculture known as communes, state ownership of all land and industrial enterprises, and centralized planning of the economy through five-year plans. The Great Leap Forward, 1958 to 1962, which aimed to rapidly industrialize China, did not end well, unfortunately, and was a bitter lesson to learn. Perhaps the most controversial is the tributary system. This model allowed China to assert economic and political dominance over East Asia region and allowed China to position itself as the Middle Kingdom, central to the world economy, and used the tributary system to balance diplomacy and trade. China's tributary system and USA's Monroe Doctrine both established a kind of regional hegemony where the dominant power, the US in the Western Hemisphere and China in East Asia, exerted control or influence over nearby countries. The U.S. used the Monroe Doctrine as a justification for intervening in the affairs of Latin American countries. Over time, this expanded into policies like the Roosevelt Corollary, 1904, which allowed U.S. to actively intervene in the domestic affairs of countries in its region. Of course, we all know how USA took this further to be a global hegemony, offering economic benefits, security, and influence over international organizations, for example, the World Bank, IMF, WTO, in exchange for cooperation and alignment with its strategic interests. The rise of U.S. dollar as a global reserve currency further expanded U.S. to maintain significant control over global economy. Recently, we saw SWIFT being used widely. The key difference is that China's tributary system was based on symbolic subordination and regional dominance, whereas the U.S. model is based on more formalized global institutions, bilateral alliances, multilateral agreements. One can argue that both achieve similar results, but at differing scale. After some personal research, I came up with few key variables that I think poor and developing countries can use to emulate China's success. Of course, these are only tip of the iceberg, as these are derived by my personal understanding with help from search engines. 1. Long-term strategic planning. China's success is grounded in long-term strategic planning, exemplified by its five-year plans that set clear economic and social goals. Developing nations can adopt this approach by creating clear, achievable, and flexible plans to guide infrastructure development, industrial policy, and social reforms. Maintaining consistency and vision across different governments or leadership changes is crucial. Stability helps investors, both domestic and foreign, feel confident in the country's economic trajectory. For example, America's space program is a long-term strategy that is embraced across its different governments or leadership. It started back in 1950s and continues today. This is a shared vision with majority of its population. It is very important to get population buy-in from the get-go to increase the possibility of a vision continuity for the long term. SpaceX by Elon Musk continues to receive significant financial support from the U.S. government. 2. Strong state-led investment in infrastructure. China's investment in infrastructure, high-speed rail, ports, roads, and energy, was critical to facilitating economic growth and attracting foreign investment. Developing nations should focus on building high-quality infrastructure, which can unlock economic opportunities and make them more attractive to foreign direct investment, FDI. Governments should strategize and prioritize infrastructures, finance and execute infrastructure projects that are large or complex for the private sectors alone to invest, since returns from infrastructure projects are slow coming. Besides, transportation infrastructure, other social infrastructure like energy, education, health, food must be given equal priority strategically. 3. Special economic zones, SEZs, and open-door policies. China's establishment of special economic zones, for example Shenzhen, was strategically selected and played a pivotal role in attracting foreign capital and technology transfer. Developing countries can adopt this model by creating business-friendly zones with favorable tax incentives, reduced regulatory barriers, and enhanced infrastructure to attract foreign companies. Like China's policy, poor nations can encourage foreign investment while ensuring that there is technology transfer and local capacity building. SEZs can serve as incubators where domestic firms can learn from foreign partners. 4. Human capital development. China's focus on improving education and technical skills helped transform its workforce into one capable of supporting its rapid industrial growth. Developing countries should invest in technical and vocational training to build a workforce suited to specific industries country has strategized to develop. Don't develop shipbuilding vocational schools if shipbuilding industry is not part of strategy. Limited government funds must be invested strategically. Countries can always invest in higher education and research and development, R&D, once returns from initial investments start flowing in. 5. Technological catch-up and innovation. China initially relied on foreign technology and joint ventures to catch up in industries like manufacturing, telecommunications, and energy. Poor nations should focus on creating policies that encourage foreign firms to invest in local industries, while simultaneously developing their own technology ecosystems. As nations grow, they should transition from technology adoption to indigenous innovation, encouraging homegrown companies to lead in sectors like renewable energy, fintech, healthcare, agritech, or any sector at sea-fitting regional environment. 6. Export-led growth and diversified economy. In the early years of its rise, China capitalized on being the world's manufacturing hub, building an economy centered around exports. Developing countries can follow this approach by focusing on industries where they have competitive advantages and becoming key players in regional value chains. For example, in the ASEAN region, countries try not to compete with each other but complement each other to be able to compete in a wider stage. China started to diversify its economy, moving from low-cost manufacturing to more advanced industries like electronics, electric vehicles, and green energy in stages. Developing countries should always seek new industries to diversify its economy. 7. Gradual economic reforms and mixed economy. China successfully managed a gradual transition from a planned economy to a market-driven system. While maintaining state control in strategic industries, it opened up other sectors to market competition. Poor countries can take a pragmatic approach to economic liberalization, protecting key sectors while gradually opening up to competition. Encouraging private enterprise within a framework of strong state guidance helped China unlock entrepreneurial potential and create dynamic companies. 8. Political stability and governance. China's consistent leadership and political stability have been vital to maintaining economic growth. While not every country can replicate China's political system, developing nations need to focus on stable governance and institutions that create a conducive environment for a continued long-term growth of vision set by previous government. Population must not be short-sighted and easily distracted by short-term gains, but stick to long-term vision. Of course, developing countries should reduce corruption, bureaucracy, and ensure transparent governance to create confidence for foreign and domestic investors alike. Technology should be used where possible. For example, fintech was used to disperse aid in some countries. 9. Industrial policy and state-driven innovation. China actively supported strategic industries that was aligned to its strategic long-term vision, including manufacturing, technology, and energy, using subsidies, tariffs, and government-backed R&D. Developing nations can emulate this by creating industrial policies tailored to key sectors that are aligned to its own long-term vision and growth pillars. 10. Social safety nets and poverty reduction. China has significantly reduced poverty, lifting hundreds of millions of people out of extreme poverty through targeted policies like the household responsibility system in agriculture and urbanization. Developing nations must focus on inclusive growth to ensure that economic benefits reach the broader population, not just the elites. Implementing basic social services like healthcare, education, and social security systems can ensure long-term stability and prevent inequality from stalling economic progress. Never forget rural development in the grand scheme of things, as they will form the backbone to feed the population. 11. Adaptability and pragmatism. China's approach has been highly pragmatic, willing to experiment and adjust policies based on what worked or didn't work. Poor countries should adopt a flexible approach to governance, being willing to adapt strategies based on changing global conditions or internal challenges. Rather than trying to achieve rapid, overnight transformation, developing nations can learn from China's gradual approach to reforms, which ensured a smoother transition without destabilizing the economy. 12. Global integration without overdependence. China strategically integrated into the global economy through the WTO and foreign investments, but also pursued self-reliance in critical sectors like agriculture, energy, and technology. Developing nations should seek to balance global integration while building local capabilities to avoid dependence on a few foreign markets or products. China's success in globalization wasn't just about being open to foreign trade, but also in absorbing foreign knowledge and localizing technologies. Other nations should emulate this by focusing on knowledge transfer when engaging in global trade and investment. In China's early economic reforms, especially during the 1980s and 1990s, foreign direct investment, FDI, played a crucial role in technology acquisition and industrial development. The government implemented a series of policies and structural changes to attract FDI, which in turn accelerated the country's technological catch-up. In 1980, China introduced special economic zones, SEZs, in regions like Shenzhen, Zhuhai, Shantou, and Xiamen. These zones offered tax incentives, relaxed regulations, and access to cheap labor, creating a favorable environment for foreign investors. You can view these SEZs as test beds for strategizing its economic reforms nationwide, including the introduction of market mechanisms and foreign technology. These zones were not only export-oriented, but also hubs for technological collaboration. By fostering partnerships with foreign companies, China ensured that local firms could absorb advanced production techniques, managerial practices, and cutting-edge technologies. China's policy towards FDI often required foreign companies to form joint ventures, JVs, with Chinese counterparts. This strategy allowed China to ensure that local firms benefited from the expertise and technology of their foreign partners. For example, in industries like automobile manufacturing, foreign companies such as Volkswagen and General Motors were required to share technological know-how with their Chinese partners, like SAIC and FAW. Through joint ventures, Chinese firms gained access to advanced technology, allowing them to accelerate the development of their own domestic industries. In the 1990s, China implemented targeted industrial policies designed to attract FDI in high-tech sectors such as electronics, telecommunications, and machinery. These sectors were considered crucial for moving China up the value chain. The government established high-tech industrial development zones to attract multinational corporations, particularly in cities like Beijing, Shanghai, and Shenzhen. Over time, Chinese companies became more adept at learning from foreign firms, with the government facilitating technology transfer agreements and providing incentives for technology innovation. While China opened its doors to FDI, it also protected key industries that it considered essential for national security or economic sovereignty. Industries such as telecommunications, aerospace, and defense were either off-limits or heavily regulated to prevent full foreign ownership. China also implemented measures to ensure that local firms could compete with foreign multinationals. For instance, policies required that certain technologies or processes be localized, thus ensuring the development of a domestic knowledge base. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, as China's manufacturing base expanded, the country started focusing on upgrading from low-cost manufacturing to higher value-added production. FDI enabled China to improve manufacturing processes, enhance quality control, and introduce automation and precision engineering in sectors like consumer electronics, automotive, and heavy machinery. Over time, Chinese companies became more innovative, leveraging their early access to foreign technologies to develop their own patents, expand R&D, and enter the global market with their own products. Companies like Huawei and BYD are prime examples of this transformation. China's late entry into the WTO in 2001 marked a turning point in its economic integration with the world. It further opened up to foreign trade and investment, reinforcing its position as the world's factory. This period saw a sharp increase in FDI inflows, particularly from advanced economies like the US, Japan, and European countries. China's entry into the WTO also required it to adhere to international rules on intellectual property, fostering a more stable environment for technological partnerships. The WTO membership accelerated China's export-driven growth while cementing its status as a key player in global supply chains. In the 2010s, China shifted from being primarily a technology importer to becoming a leader in homegrown innovation. Policies such as Made in China 2025 and initiatives to become a leader in artificial intelligence, 5G, and renewable energy exemplify this shift. While foreign partnerships remain important, China increasingly prioritizes domestic innovation and R&D investments, aiming to reduce reliance on foreign technologies, particularly in sensitive sectors like semiconductors. China's economic strategy, heavily reliant on FDI in the early stages, laid the groundwork for its technological advancement. By carefully managing its approach to FDI, using SEZs, joint ventures, and industrial policies, China was able to extract substantial technological benefits while maintaining control over key industries. Today, China is moving from technology assimilation to innovation, as seen in its growing leadership in sectors like AI, electric vehicles, EVs, and telecommunications. This evolution reflects China's long-term planning and strategic use of external resources to foster internal development. So, why did foreign investors agree to China's policies? Despite the strict conditions such as forming joint ventures, JVs, and technology transfers? The potential for 1. Market access. 2. Cost advantages. 3. Long-term growth opportunities in China's booming economy was too significant to be ignored. Let's break down these 3 factors in more detail to understand. At the time of China's opening, many emerging markets lacked the infrastructure and political stability that China provided. Though China imposed strict rules on foreign investment, it was still seen as one of the most stable and promising environments for large-scale industrial investments compared to other developing nations. Many foreign firms feared being left out of China's massive economic boom if they didn't invest. Competitors were eager to gain a foothold in China, and this competitive pressure pushed companies to agree to China's JV and technology sharing terms rather than risk losing market share to rivals. The lure of being the first in their industry to establish a presence in China drove firms to accept terms they might have avoided in other markets. China presented a huge opportunity for foreign companies looking to sell their products and services. The chance to tap into a vast consumer base with a population of over 1 billion people was very appealing. China's economic reforms from the 1980s led to rapid GDP growth and urbanization, creating a rising middle class with increasing purchasing power. Many foreign companies recognized that, although the Chinese policies required technology transfer and local partnerships, these were necessary trade-offs to secure a long-term presence in China. The potential for future market dominance was a strong motivator. Entering any market early would provide the advantage to establish brand recognition, gain customer loyalty, and outcompete rivals in the long run. Foreign companies often viewed the early-stage restrictions as part of the cost of doing business, banking on the hope that over time, as China's economy liberalized, these restrictions would loosen or become less burdensome. Joint ventures, while initially restrictive, gave advantage to foreign firms to localize their products and business models by leveraging the local knowledge of Chinese partners. This not only helped them navigate the vastly unknown and little understood Chinese market, but also improved the adaptability and relevance of their offerings to local consumers. Many companies like Volkswagen and PepsiCo found that partnering with Chinese firms allowed them to customize their products for Chinese consumers, boosting their success in the local market. Most popularly known reason was its low-cost labor, which made it an ideal destination for setting up manufacturing operations. Foreign companies could produce goods at a fraction of the cost they would face in more developed economies. The combination of low wages, improving infrastructure, and proximity to other fast-growing markets in Asia made China a hub for global supply chains. Foreign investors were eager to take advantage of these competitive production conditions. By entering China, foreign firms were able to integrate vertically by controlling or partnering with key parts of their supply chain. This reduced costs and gave companies better control over their manufacturing processes. The relatively underdeveloped nature of China's domestic industries also allowed foreign firms to gain early mover advantages, providing them with significant leverage in their respective sectors. China established special economic zones (SEZs) and offered attractive incentives for foreign companies, such as tax breaks, relaxed regulations, and streamlined administrative processes. These SEZs minimized the bureaucratic challenges that could otherwise deter foreign investment. The flexibility and incentives provided within these zones reduced the perceived risks and costs for foreign firms, making them more willing to comply with China's JV and technology sharing requirements. China's SEZs were designed to attract export-oriented businesses, offering regulatory frameworks that made it easier for companies to export goods produced in China to other countries. This further incentivized multinational corporations to invest in China, as it became a key manufacturing base for exporting to global markets. China's strategic location in East Asia made it a critical part of global supply chains. Manufacturing in China allowed companies to reduce shipping times and costs when serving other markets in Asia. As China modernized its ports, railways, and airports, it became easier and cheaper for foreign firms to export products made in China to international markets, making the country an essential node in their global operations. On the part of foreign investors, a big miscalculation or assumption on their part was they believed that, as China integrated more deeply into the global economy, especially after its World Trade Organization (WTO) entry in 2001, the country would continue to liberalize its market and ease restrictions on foreign ownership and technology transfer. The expectation was that China's early restrictive policies would eventually soften as the country became more market-driven and reliant on foreign capital and expertise. In conclusion, foreign investors were willing to accept China's JV requirements, technology transfers, and local content policies because they calculated that the benefits far outweighed the challenges. The potential for market access, cost advantages, and long-term growth opportunities in China's booming economy was too significant to ignore. Many viewed these requirements as a temporary inconvenience, as they miscalculated that China would liberalize its market and political structure. In many cases, foreign investors focused on immediate short-term benefits, such as access to low-cost labor, market expansion, and export advantages and liberalization assumptions, without fully grasping China's culture and long history. This is still true to even today. Many companies saw the restrictive policies as trade-offs for the lucrative opportunity of entering China's market. China, on the other hand, had a more long-term, strategic vision, which allowed it to not only catch up, but in some cases surpass the very investors who helped fuel its early growth. Quick buck or profit margins were prioritized over long-term strategy. Cheap labor, market access, export hub were too enticing. China viewed foreign investment as a learning opportunity. They implemented attractive policies to lure foreign investments. Chinese understood and used the right bait to lure. You see, China didn't just absorb foreign technology, but made strategic moves to dominate certain industries. China focused in industries like telecommunication, electric vehicles, and alternative energy sectors. They avoided in most part to compete in existing matured consumer-driven sectors. Today, Chinese companies have not only caught up, but in many cases leapfrogged foreign competitors in these industries. Once they have caught up and leapfrogged, China's strategy now emphasizes moving up the value chain, especially semiconductors, AI, and robotics, evolving from a low-cost manufacturer into a hub for high-tech industries and innovation. This shift is visible in initiatives like Made in China 2025. Many foreign companies became too dependent on their Chinese partners for local production and underestimated the long-term impact of giving away intellectual property, IP, and technology. In sectors like electronics and automotive, China has now developed homegrown alternatives that compete directly with foreign brands. Foreign car manufacturers such as Volkswagen and General Motors dominated the Chinese market. Chinese firms, instead of competing in the internal combustion engine transportation, emerged as global leaders in electric vehicles, EVs, instead. China strategized to compete in transportation industry using a different technology altogether. This has potentially allowed Chinese companies to dominate global markets in the transportation industry in future. In the telecommunications sector, Huawei started by partnering with foreign companies like Nokia and Ericsson, but has now surpassed in many areas of 5G infrastructure and telecommunications technology. Huawei has become a global powerhouse, threatening the very companies that once contributed to its growth. China expanded from early old technology transfer to innovate and be the leader in solar and wind energy. Today, it is the world's largest producer of solar panels and leads in wind energy as well. This has allowed Chinese companies to dominate global markets in renewable technologies, surpassing many early investors. Through JVs, Chinese companies didn't simply copy foreign technology, they adapted it to the local market and improved upon it. Over time, China transitioned from simply importing technology to becoming a global leader in R&D. Today, Chinese companies are pioneering new technologies, particularly in AI, biotech, and semiconductors, areas where early foreign investors are now playing the game of catch-up. The joint venture model, while beneficial in the short term for gaining market entry, allowed Chinese firms to become technologically self-sufficient, reducing their reliance on foreign technology over time. As China's own companies have become more competitive, the bargaining power of foreign firms has diminished. In sectors where foreign firms once dominated, like consumer electronics or pharmaceuticals, Chinese companies are now formidable competitors. Some sectors, like telecommunications equipment or electric vehicles, are now led by Chinese champions who have eclipsed foreign firms. China's strategic approach also included strong state support for its domestic companies through subsidies, financing, and favorable policies. While foreign firms were initially needed for their expertise and capital, China shifted toward building its own champions, which could compete both domestically and globally. Subsidies for targeted industries such as electric vehicles, semiconductors, and clean energy helped boost the competitiveness of local firms against foreign rivals. Conclusion is, foreign investors entered China with a focus on short-term gains, seeking immediate market access, lower production costs, and an export platform. No doubt, many foreign investors did rake in huge profits in the short term that spanned at least a decade. However, China's long-term strategic vision allowed it to absorb foreign technology and then leapfrog foreign firms in key sectors. As China evolved into a global innovation leader, many foreign firms now find themselves competing against Chinese companies. China's ability to learn, adapt, and eventually outpace its foreign investors highlights the asymmetry in long-term strategy, with foreign companies focusing on short-term profits, while China was building for the future. Special Economic Zones, SEZs, were designed to attract foreign investment, increase exports, and serve as testing grounds or target experiments for market-oriented reforms in a largely socialist economy. SEZs were a cornerstone of its strategy to attract foreign direct investment, FDI, in the early stages of its economic reform. China established its first Special Economic Zones, SEZs, in 1980 as part of its broader economic reforms under Deng Xiaoping. China strategically selected coastal cities. The first four SEZs were Shenzhen, next to Hong Kong, Zhuhai, next to Macau, Shantou, in Guangdong Province, and Xiamen, in Fujian Province. These locations are obviously carefully chosen for their proximity to existing global trade hubs like Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan, already offering convenient access to international markets and gives foreign investors some familiarity and ease. In 1984, the program expanded to include 14 additional coastal cities, and over time, more regions were designated as SEZs. Tax breaks were a major attraction. China offered reduced corporate taxes, as low as 15%, in SEZs, compared to the national rate of around 30%. Tax holidays for the first few profitable years and import duty exemptions for machinery and equipment encouraged foreign companies to set up operations. SEZs allowed greater flexibility in labor laws, enabling companies to hire and manage local workers more freely compared to the rest of China. The zones also permitted full profit repatriation, meaning foreign investors could take their profits out of China without heavy restrictions. China heavily invested in infrastructure within SEZs, including ports, roads, and electricity, to create a modern, business-friendly environment. One-stop administrative offices were set up to streamline approvals and minimize bureaucratic delays, making it easier for foreign companies to start operations. SEZs provided foreign companies with access to low-cost labor, which was one of China's greatest competitive advantages at the time. This allowed companies to manufacture goods at a fraction of the cost compared to developed nations. SEZs were experimental zones, where China allowed greater openness to market-driven practices compared to the rest of the country. Foreign firms enjoyed more autonomy in decision-making, marketing, and production without strict state intervention. Unlike other areas of China, where joint ventures with local partners were often required, SEZs allowed greater levels of foreign ownership. In some cases, 100% foreign-owned enterprises were permitted, offering investors more control over their businesses. SEZs became export hubs by design, offering duty-free entry of raw materials and preferential access to international markets. Foreign investors could export finished goods without paying tariffs, turning SEZs into global production and trade centers. China promoted joint ventures in SEZs, allowing foreign companies to collaborate with local firms, which facilitated the transfer of technology and expertise. This was part of China's broader strategy to catch up technologically with the West while offering foreign firms local market access. By combining these incentives, China created an environment in SEZs that was highly attractive to foreign investors. SEZs became a launching pad for China's broader economic reforms, helping to transform the country into the global economic powerhouse it is today.